everybody? Welcome to the Straight Out of BS podcast. Thank you guys again for your support. We've broken 500 subscribers, so now we need to break 1,000, and then the channel will be monetized. But we don't need to do that. That would be cool. It's not like an expectation, because that's not even why I started this work. But it'll be cool. Thank you guys to all the Patreon members that have supported. It's never been expected, so any financial support that I get, it means the world to me. And everything goes back into improving the podcast and making it a better experience for the listener. And hopefully someday we can get like new legislation passed and stuff like that. So yeah, I want to do a moment of silence for the person still struggling with intrusive thoughts or drug addiction or anything like that. So on the count of 3, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you went and what year.
My name is Lex. I went to Academy at Ivy Ridge from 04 to 05, and then I was transferred to Carolina Springs Academy, CSA, from 05 to 06.
Okay, and can you walk us through what was happening at home before you got sent there?
So my parents were divorced. They divorced when I was, I think, maybe 6 months old. Less than 1, I think, or around 1. And then my dad remarried, and my dad had custody. My dad remarried when I was about 3 to my stepmom, and they're still together. And I loved my stepmom. I asked her to marry my dad. And then it seemed like when they got married that she seemed to kind of turn on me. Looking back now, I'm not sure if that was just me being upset about things and being a young kid who doesn't understand life yet, or not. But my mom was also, my dad is very conservative. And my mom, my bio mom, is very much the opposite. So I had a very different relationship with each of them. But I was living with my dad at the time and having a really hard time with my stepmom, like our relationship. And so I was, I had an attitude. I called my stepmom a bitch several times. I was listening to music that they didn't like. So I was listening to, back then, Biggie and Tupac and some, heavy metal and things that they didn't like. And I didn't have friends that they really necessarily approved of. But when I was living in my dad's house, I will say I was grounded all the time. I was in my room reading books constantly because I was just grounded a lot. I wasn't allowed to go on a lot of sleepovers. I wasn't the kid going to the movies all the time or going to these different events. Like, I was very much restricted to my home. My dad and that side of my family is very Catholic as well. So, and I was going to Catholic school, so I was going to church like twice a week. I was doing all those things, which I personally, even back then, I had a lot of problems with many things. I had a lot of questions that, many people who either grew up in that type of religious environment know very well. When you ask these type of questions or just have any question in general, it's very much demonized. And as a young kid, it was, and going to a Catholic school, it was very much like, get your shit together, kind of thing, and don't ask these questions. It just is what it is, type of thing. I will say now I'm very much atheist, and I think that upbringing has a lot to do with it. But so that was really tough. And then my mom on the other side, my bio mom, she's a lot more liberal in her political views, just in general. She's more spiritual than anything. There's no, not like a set religion or anything like that. So I was going back and forth. And I think as a young kid, that was probably very confusing for me. Also, as any kid, like, you want your parents to be together. So there was a lot of that. But I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't having sex. I wasn't doing any of those things. But my older brother, I have 5 siblings, or 4 siblings. I have an older brother who's 2 years older than me. And he was sent to a military school, in Indiana, non-affiliated, when he was in 7th and 8th grade, because he was acting out, a little bit more violently, for sure. But he went to that school, and it was very much threatened to me at several points in my young teenagehood, that I would be sent away. I would be sent to a convent, or I don't even know if they existed really much back then, but to a convent, or I would be sent to a military school or something like that. But never in my wildest dreams would it be where I went. And then I have three younger siblings. So let me preface. So my older sibling is with my mom and my dad. So we are like full siblings, I guess you could say. The other three are with my dad and my stepmother. And those three, never in a million years would they step foot in these type of places. They were very much, you know, I don't want to bash my parents, but I feel like they were very much like special in a lot of ways, especially like in my stepmom's eyes. And we were just kind of like the messed up kids a little bit. But that was kind of like where things were going. And then one day that was it. Get dressed, let's go, and you're gone.
Okay. And were you transported? Did your parents bring you up there? Walk us through what happened with that.
So I think as lucky as I can be, in this situation, I was not transported through the groups that were transporting kids. I'm actually very thankful that I wasn't, because I think that would have made things 10 times worse. But my dad woke me up very early. I remember it very vividly. I was 14 years old. My dad woke me up in the morning and he said, "Hey, we're going to go play baseball at the park," which my family on that side is very baseball oriented. So I didn't think of it as like this means something. It was like, we're literally going to go play baseball. So I was like, okay, great. And so I was trying to put just some kind of gym clothes type of things on and some slides. And he was like, no slides. You need to put sneakers on. You need to wear these pair of shorts, this shirt. And I thought that was weird, but I didn't really grasp that concept. And then we went to the park and we sat at a picnic table, which again, I thought was weird because I thought we were playing baseball. And then I saw my mom, my bio mom, walk up, and I was like, this is not good, because my mom and my dad did not get along at all. So I never saw them together. And so watching her walk up, I was like, something is wrong. And I still didn't know what was going to happen. I thought the threats were empty threats. But they came up and he just basically explained, I don't like where your life is going. I think there's an issue. Like, we're going to send you away. And then I basically got to say goodbye to my mom. And then we went to the airport and we got in a plane. I was living in Ohio at the time. And then we flew up to New York and we went there and then we walked in. I think that was at the time, because I'm looking through some of the files that I have and I see that he does talk about having a tour, which I know was a fake tour. It was an upper level that was basically, you tell them everything good or you're going to be in trouble or you're dropped, what have you. And then they only showed them certain areas of the facility, which none of the kids were around during that time, of course. But I think that's the time that he had his tour. But we walked in the doors and I was just put into a room, and then I didn't even get to say goodbye to him. I didn't see him again. And then that was when they did the strip search and they took every ring that I had on me and, took my shoes, they just took everything. And then they were just like, you're here now, deal with it.
Okay.
That was a little rough.
Do you remember them going over a rule manual with you? Do you remember them handing you a rule manual? I know that they buddy you up with somebody, but I'm curious if they handed you anything physical, like anything paper.
To be honest, I don't remember anything physical. The only time I remember seeing something physical was later in the program when either we would write because we had to write our own corrections on ourselves or on other people. And then it would be like a rule sheet that, we could go off of that. But that was even rare. But no, I was just like stuck with what we called Hope Buddies. And we had 3 days. And the Hope Buddy, so we weren't allowed to talk at all. unless we were given, not even spoken to, but just given permission to talk. But when you had your Hope Buddy, which was at that time, because we have levels, there were 6 levels. So when you come in, you're level 1, of course. So it was a level 3 that would be a Hope Buddy. And they would just have 3 days to be able to talk to you all the time and explain things. And then you could obviously ask questions and things like that. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, 3 days was not enough for you. I mean, it took weeks for you to even grasp where you were at this point. But yeah, we only had 3 days. And then after that, you were expected to just have everything done and understood to a T. And if not, then it was a correction. Points taken away.
Okay. And how long after you got there did everything fully sink in, and did you realize, like, holy crap, where am I?
To be honest, I have a lot of gaps in my memory, which seems to be very common along, with a lot of us. But I think it took, probably a few weeks for me to really get, like, I'm not going home. I mean, if not a couple months, like, I'm not going home. This is not a normal school. This isn't just a regular boarding school or something like that. Like, this is weird.
Okay. And do you remember, like, if you had to estimate how many girls were there when you got there and how many girls were there when you left?
When I got there, there was probably, so this was when I went, I will never forget it, June 7th, 2004. There was probably like a good almost 100 girls there. While I was there, that was when Casa by the Sea in Mexico shut down, and we got an influx of a massive amount of people. I'd say, I think on both sides, but I know more of the girl side because they kept us so separated. So we probably had, even closer to 150, maybe more girls when I left. And that was, I have it now. I didn't know exactly when I left. I thought it was around mid 2005, but my paperwork does say July 26th, 2005 is when I went to CSA.
Okay. And how did you like the food there? Was it horrible? Was it bearable? Was it good?
It was not good. It was not good at all. I do remember that it was a rule that you had to eat 80% of your meal, which, if you're looking at percentage wise and you're having the dorm parents, which were the people who were kind of overseeing the different groups, which they called families, they would, at the end of the day, like, depending on the dorm mom that you had that day, you would just have to eat everything. I gained a lot of weight. I gained probably like 20 plus pounds while I was there. I gained a lot of weight. I still have stretch marks to this day for that. But we had to eat pretty much everything. And the food was terrible. The only thing that I do remember being good was, I don't know if anyone's said this so far, but Chef Chester's oatmeal. I can't remember if it was Tuesdays or Thursdays, but however he made that oatmeal, he put little pizzazz in it, whatever spices he put in it. It was delicious, and we loved it, and we just like lived for that day that we could have that for breakfast. But other than that, pretty much the food was absolutely horrible. I do remember, I have an issue with raisins. I don't like them. They make me just gag, and I just don't do well with them. And I remember we had a lot of bread pudding sometimes. It wasn't very good, of course. But I would eat everything but the raisins. So that's clearly more than 80% of my meal. And I would get in trouble for not eating the raisins. And it would get to a point where I just had to take water, and I would have to take them like pills because I couldn't eat them. And there were times where I would vomit or things like that. I would get a correction. I would get in trouble. There was a couple times where I vomited, and we had some pretty messed up people that were telling me, like, now you've vomited too much and you haven't eaten 80% of your meal. Now you need to eat that. And I know that this has happened to other people who unfortunately did that. That was something that I just was like, absolutely not. And I got in trouble and got, sent away or had corrections or what have you. But it was scary. It was very scary.
Okay. How long after you got there did they put you through your first seminar?
That I don't know. I don't remember. I don't think it was too long. It was probably a few months
Okay.
when I went through orientation. I don't really remember orientation very well at all. I do remember parts of discovery, um, and then I remember parts of focus at the other program, but I don't remember too much of orientation, to be honest.
And how was your program? Did you rebel? Did you try to get points but always got consequenced? Did you find it like kind of like not pointless, but like just like you just felt like it was just like me, like just you just felt helpless? Did you feel helpless?
Yeah,
Did,
for
did you do
sure.
good? Did you do good?
All the time I felt so hopeless. I was just like, what? Like, I can't leave. This is so scary. Like, I have no, we couldn't call our parents. We couldn't call anyone. We couldn't, if you reported anything, it was still your fault. You had to take accountability. That was their big thing, you know? But I was at AIR for, I think, 14 months, almost 14 months. And I never went past level 2. I was like barely a level 2 pretty much the whole entire time. I think there were definitely moments where things happened where I was like, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. And I kind of rebelled, I guess you could say. But I wasn't like what we would call a refuser. I didn't, you know, say absolutely not to everything and like, get crazy all the time. But there were times where I was just like, I would get correction for something and I was like, that's ridiculous. That's nonsense. Like, I'm just being a human type of thing. But I definitely thought that it was just crazy because I was trying to learn the rules so hard. I was trying to follow everything. I was even trying to be a kiss ass a lot of the time. And it still fell back on me. And if I didn't get enough corrections during the week, then that means I wasn't working my program because I wasn't telling on myself. So it was like there was no way you could win. And so I definitely got to a point where I was just very depressed and I was just like, this is what do I do now? It was like a robot.
Did they choose you out of any seminars while you were there?
Um, to be honest, I feel like I might have. I think I did my first discovery. I don't remember everything. A lot of memories are coming back, now going through some of my files and, the documentary coming out and talking to a lot of survivors and things like that. A lot of things are coming back. I think I ended up choosing out of discovery my first time, and it was for something ridiculous. Because I think it was more for not like telling people or having my story told that I was doing drugs or doing these other things, because I didn't do that. I do remember that was one of my biggest initial reactions when I first got there. I was like, I don't belong here. Like, people were talking about all these things that they had done, sneaking out and doing drugs and all this stuff. And I was just like, what? No, like that's not me. Why am I here? Like, I am the one person that doesn't belong here. And I'm sure a lot of people felt that way. But I'm pretty sure during during my first discovery, I think that was what happened, where they were trying to tell, us to explain these certain things. And one of the big things too was that my intake, when they did drug testing, I was negative. And I got my files, and I do have the original test that shows that I was negative. But my family rep told my family that I was positive for THC. Which, I mean, I was always grounded. I was always in the house. I had no way of even being around that. And my family to this.
To me, it's weird why they pick THC. Why not pick like meth or crack or some shit? You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know.
THC,
I don't know,
like,
but that to this day, until I got my files recently in the past few years, that has been a point of contention with me and my family, because I've never admitted that I did it, because I didn't, and I've been so steadfast on that. I had to falsely admit to a lot of things while I was in there, but that was one thing that I was like, absolutely not. I never did that. And I mean, my family, I've sent them now the test, and I haven't heard back about that. But I mean, to this day, pretty much they've kind of believed that. But I think I had to choose out of the seminar because I wouldn't say that I did all these things, these horrible things that teenagers do, to be sent here. because I didn't do them.
Yeah.
And they were just like, you're not working your program, you're avoiding, you're lying, you're manipulating, you're all these things. So I think I'm pretty sure I did the first discovery. And then I did end up going through focus, because once you earn level 3, you are able to do focus. That was at CSA. And I did do focus twice, because I did focus. I made level 3, I did focus, and then I guess I wasn't progressing how I should have been. And so they made me do focus again. So I did do that twice.
Okay. And I just want to clarify for people that might try and take what I just said out of context, like saying the THC, how they should have said crack or meth. The only reason I'm saying that is because most people, they were like, oh no, you were a crackhead. And it's surprising to me that they would use THC. That's just, I don't see THC as
That's very
harmful.
true. Most of the people, they would say, oh, they're doing coke, they're doing PCP, they're doing crack, they're doing, all these different things. And unfortunately, there was a lot of kids who had to falsely admit to doing those things because they said that their tests were positive, and then the lucky amount of us that got our tests back, it shows negative. And then there were kids that were doing that.
Yeah. Did you suffer with any grooming or sexual assault or anything like that from staff, or did you witness anything like student on student, staff towards student? What do you know regarding that kind of stuff?
Unfortunately, yes. When I did my intake, it was with people who have seen the documentary now. They may be a little bit more familiar with the director or the assistant. I think she was the assistant director of the girls' side at Ivy Ridge, Amy Ritchie. She did my intake, and that was kind of the starting point, unfortunately, for me. So I definitely experienced a lot of grooming from her. She knew that I had quote unquote, I guess, mommy issues. I wanted my biological mother to be more in my life. And then I had a stepmom that I kind of seemingly hated at the time. And I needed that motherly kind of energy. I seemed very lost, which I'm sure I was at that point. I'm also, again, 14, 15 years old. And it started out very, her biggest thing to me was like, this is a mentorship. I'm your mentor. I'm helping you. And she would also tell me like, oh, I'm so sorry. She would tell me a lot of times there's, a lot of the girls in here, she wouldn't really talk about the guys, but a lot of the girls in here they're helpless. They're going to have to go through this until they're 18. They're not ever going to get the help, or they're not going to be able to go through this the way that things need to go. But I think that you have the potential, so I'm going to help you. And it was very much like a, I've got you type of thing, and that mentorship. And then it was very, very slight. It was very, sweet touches, very just like on my arm, on my shoulder, pulling my hair back, like very small things that I just was like, I've always wanted a mom. This is great, and then it just started to kind of escalate. And it seemed like when I would maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable, she would back off, but then she would ice me out. And then at that point, it was like, wait, no, never mind. I want that mentorship again. I want that relationship again. And then I would come, then she would bring me back in, and then it was, it would just kind of escalate from there. And I do remember a few of the girls, me witnessing like a few of the girls later that were, because I'm pretty sure that we were called Amy's girls. Like there were a specific, amount of girls that were called Amy's girls, over the years. So people knew what was going on. It wasn't a secret at all. And we got a lot of pushback from some of the other girls that were like in our families or other families. We were looked at, with, I think, a lot of jealousy in some ways, because they didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. They just, I think, saw that we were getting an extra candy bar, or we were getting, a level challenge, or we were, you know, like we were getting these benefits, but they didn't know what was really happening for us to get those things. But I definitely saw that there were, I mean, there's definitely a few girls that come to mind immediately who were like the main ones for sure that that I remember seeing, at least when I first got there, that were kind of part of that.
Okay.
But when that was happening, it was, we felt, I think all of us probably feel the same way, that we felt it was like just us.
Were you there during the riot?
I was. So I do remember, I think about this all the time, because I do remember that we had our family specifically. I don't remember if it was other families, but I do remember that it was our family, faith family specifically. We got moved to, I think it was dorm 2. And that was where the upper levels, so 4, 5, and 6, they used to sleep, and then they moved people around. I don't remember why, but they moved us over there, and so the guys were on one level, and then we were on another. So we still didn't have any contact like whatsoever. But I remember that we were in our dorms and we heard what was going on, but we just had, you know, the dorm moms and everyone just kind of swarm in, and we were very much told, oh, it's the guys lashing out again. You know, someone's going crazy, someone's, you know, doing this or that. And so we were kind of scared a little bit at the time. We didn't know what was going on. We never had any information beforehand that they were going to do this. And then we were, of course, put on, you know, shut down or locked down and all that kind of stuff. So like we weren't allowed to talk, we weren't allowed to move. And I think we were on like a serious lockdown and what they would call cat 4 silence. So basically, if you talked, made a noise, anything, you would basically lose like all your points. You'd drop everything. But we were on that for like a couple weeks. It was a big deal. But they did everything in their power to make sure that we didn't join in and we didn't know what was going on. And looking back, that's one of the things that I think about all the time. I'm like, I wonder if we knew ahead of time, or if we didn't have that huge lockdown and that rhetoric, you know, like if we would have joined in, would things have changed? Would it finally have been done at that point?
Yeah, I don't think so though, because I think the police would have shown up eventually, you know, and did the.
Yes. And then we all would have just been sent to Tranquility Bay. So
yeah, it could have been even worse for you guys, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But okay. What was the hardest part about being there for you at Academy and Ridge?
I mean, kind of everything, to be honest. It was being away from anyone that I knew at all or felt like I could trust. It was never knowing who you could trust, because someone could be nice in your face and then all of a sudden you get a correction and you're told on. I mean, we had to demonize our fellow, you know, students that we were around, you know, like that was the only way you could move ahead, is if you called out everyone else for basically functioning as a human being. I mean that was hard too, like really having to call people out and give them corrections, because you knew that it was going to make them lose points, it was going to make them drop levels, it was going to make them stay there longer. That was horrendous for us. Not being able to talk ever. I mean, getting in trouble for saying excuse me, or, you know, ouch, or I'm sorry, you know, little things like that. I mean, just being so cut off from the world. For those of us who had to deal with, you know, some of the sexual stuff. I mean, I remember even going back to that, I remember even being in some of the showers and like male staff coming in and being in the shower area with us. I mean, we were kids. It was, you know, again, now as an adult looking back, that's a huge red flag. Back then, it was just a little bit scary and uncomfortable, but I didn't really understand at that point in my life, like what was really going on. But I mean, it was scary. I mean, it was very scary. There was a lot of things. There's every little thing that we did was controlled. Everything we ate, every sound we made, every movement we made. I mean, it was. I can't imagine any other thing that was that structured, but to the extent where you can't even be human almost. And I think for us to be children at the end of the day, which I think a lot of people forget, we were kids, we were children. It was very scary. It was very scary for a lot of us. And then, for a lot of us who really tried to work the program and do the things we were supposed to do, and then we still were always wrong, it was confusing. It was very confusing. And then it was just very hopeless. And I think getting to a point where I finally was I didn't understand depression, but I was finally becoming depressed, becoming anxious, hypervigilant, having suicidal thoughts, which I'd never had in my life. Even going through what I did before coming through the program, never even having that. That was pretty scary, for sure.
Yeah, and how did you deal with that in the program?
I think a lot of the times I just didn't say anything, because then I knew that I was going to be on suicide watch, and it was like, it would be even more uncomfortable for me, and I'd be watched even more. I think that was a lot scarier. And then at that time, I didn't really understand what suicide meant. I don't think I really understood what that would entail. It was just, I don't want to be here anymore, and nothing matters to me. And I hope I go to sleep and I don't wake up. I think that was more what it was for me, because I was so young. But I would never have told anybody that at that time, because then I would be even more scrutinized, and that would be even scarier for me, and even more, anxiety. And we couldn't really talk, amongst ourselves and tell people certain things. And then if you did, even someone who you thought was your best friend, they might tell on you, or, what have you. So it was very much like we just really didn't know who to trust ever, or what we could divulge as far as our feelings or what was going on.
Okay. Walk us through how the transfer to the other facility went.
So I also kind of remember a small amount of that. I do remember getting picked up from Ivy Ridge, and we went
Did you know you were going?
I didn't. No, they just picked me up. And which I wish that I would have known, because I would have loved to say goodbye to some people who, thank goodness, now I've reconnected with. But back then it was just like so terrible that I couldn't say goodbye to anyone. But I remember that I just got, they brought me to the office, like the main office, and my dad came and got me, and we went to a hotel. And I do remember he gave me an electric razor, and I was able to shave, because if you weren't level 4, you couldn't shave. And, I was just like Chewbacca at that point, because I'd been there for 14 months. And he did let me shave, and I was like, it was like such a wonderful moment. I was so excited to take a shower that wasn't, 4 minutes or 5 minutes, because they timed us for all these things. I was able to talk, I was able to move, I was able to shave. Like, it was just a wonderful thing. I don't think I got that many privileges, to be honest. I think I just was able to be human for a little bit, but it was amazing to me after 14 months of being in this place. And then I don't remember if we drove down to South Carolina. I want to say that we drove, but I don't remember if we drove down or we flew down. But then I just, in my memory, I suddenly remember just being at Carolina Springs, and I went in, and I was level 2, I think, because I never really went very far when I was at Ivy Ridge. And then I remember walking in, and it was similar uniforms. It was just a different color. And it was just kind of a different layout, because at Ivy Ridge, it's like a bunch of brick buildings. And at CSA, it was trailers. It was just like a bunch of trailers. And then, of course, seeing all these new people, and having to, learn, who everyone is and what to do. But I do remember, and then my dad like dropped me off at the front office, and like that was it. He just walked out, and then I was there again. But I do remember, I don't remember if I had like a hope buddy. I think I had something like that for a little bit. I want to say I do, but I think that if I remember correctly, I think that they cut it in half because I had already been at a WASP program, which was AIR before. So I should have already known pretty much how things were going to go. So I'm pretty sure that I had like a kind of halved session with people telling me the rules because everything was the same at that point. And then I just had to, I had to get right back into it. There were definitely things that were different. And I had to kind of figure that out. But for the most part, it was the same program. It was just a different environment.
Okay. Is there anything else that they didn't touch on in the documentary about Ivy Ridge that you want to touch on before we move on to Carolina Springs?
I think I wrote a few notes because I didn't want to forget about stuff. Actually, one of the things that I do want to touch on was the school that we had, which is it was the same kind of schooling, I think, in both of them, because they were owned by the same people. The school was ridiculous. It wasn't an education. It was in the documentary when Catherine says, we just retook the quizzes until we got 80% to be able to pass. That's exactly what we did. If we didn't understand something, we just would memorize the answers and we would just keep taking it. Because the teachers weren't certified, and the teachers, it would be, if I remember correctly, it wouldn't even be multiple teachers. We would be in the computer lab and it would be one teacher for a certain subject who was not certified whatsoever. And then if you got called upon, because you would have to have a sign-on sheet and everything, if you were lucky enough to get that 3 to 5 minutes with the teacher, I mean, that it isn't enough. That's not, I came in as a sophomore in high school. I didn't really know much, and it was just ridiculous. But they did have a Bible class that we had to take that was within that kind of online realm. And growing up Catholic, I remember having to take these tests and read these things. And I was like, I went to Catholic school. I had these things just shoved down my throat and ingrained. I know the Bible very well. I know these teachings very well. And what they're saying doesn't sound right. And there's just kind of some weird things. And so I would get things incorrect in some of the little quizzes or tests. And I was just confused because I was like, but no, I know that that's the right answer. And now looking back, now I know it was because it was Mormon teachings. And so it was a little bit different, but which I think is quite ironic that my dad didn't know that, being as Catholic as he is. I'm actually very eager to hear what he says when I tell him about those things that, as Catholic as you are, you sent me to a Mormon run school. But they did, it wasn't that they just kind of threw these things at us and were sending us to like a chapel and, doing all this stuff, but it was little things like that, where it was the little Bible classes and, little things like that were just kind of throwing us this information. But I do remember that very clearly being just very strange for me. And I do have, which I don't know how much you'll be able to see on here, but aside from that, my dad, it's very interesting. He's a talker. He very much looks at a lot of things, and he will say his 2 cents all over it. So I do have an email that's like 3 full pages after he attended PC1 with me at Ivy Ridge, and I have a copy of it in my files. And he's basically just saying that the entire way that the seminars are put together is not helpful at all for parents, for kids. He put together in his job, he worked with a lot of HR kind of things. And so he would do seminars in his job. And so he was like, I know how this works, and the way that you guys are doing stuff doesn't make sense. We're not able to really work with our kids, and getting unsolicited advice from people who are not professionals is not helpful whatsoever when we're looking at we're trying to save our kids' lives here, and we're also paying $3,000+ a month. This is kind of ridiculous. But so he sent this entire long email. And so I don't know how much you guys can see, but, I have it blurred, but you can see where my family rep just highlighted things. She wrote stuff on the side. So what I can see she has here: excuses and blame, red flags, not open, trying to avoid, like things like that. And then she would send this to, I guess, whoever her boss was. And so this is the only big email that I have that there's that there. And but I was there for 14 months. So I can only imagine what I sent out and what was sent back. The other thing I will say is that my family rep, Rhonda Doherty, who I had a very big issue with, I had, like I mentioned earlier, I have 3 younger siblings and an older sibling. And when I was there, I was told that I could write to my family once a week. And so I would write them all letters. And she did not get those letters to them. Our letters were looked at up and down when they came in and when they came out. When they came in, if our parents said anything that they didn't like, it would be blacked out. This is the same for AIR and CSA. I don't know about any other programs. I'm sure it's the same. And then if we sent out a letter that our family reps read and didn't like, so if we're talking about abuse or that we hate it here or it's horrible, like come get us, they would either not send the letters or they would tell us that we had to rewrite them and they would tell us what to write. But those letters were not, I guess, sent to my siblings. And I remember getting letters from them saying, why don't you love me? Why aren't you talking to me? You know, what did you forget about me? Things like that. And that was really hard. I mean, to this day, it still hurts my heart. Like I don't really have a great relationship with them. You know, I'm working on that, but I think that was a really big part of the divide with me and my siblings, because they thought that I just didn't care and I didn't write them, and it wasn't my control, but also I didn't know about it. And so that was, you know, it's things like this where they isolate you, they do certain things that they don't tell you, and it's just like a, you know, excuse my French, but a mind fuck, you know, in a lot of ways, for sure.
Okay. And then at Carolina Springs Academy, what level did you get to there?
I got to level 4. I was so proud of myself. I finally was an upper level. I remember having like a day pass with my mom, and being able to wear my hair down, like, you know, be a human, listen to music, you know, eat some candy, you know, talk to my girls a little bit before the end of the day. Excuse me, but I made level 4. And then I was at Carolina Springs for, excuse me, I think another 13 months. But it took me a very long time to get there. I don't remember exactly. I haven't gotten to the point of being able to talk to my parents about some of the stuff. We're working on it. Waiting for them to watch the doc and kind of go through some stuff, but they would probably remember a little bit better than me. But I don't think I was an upper level for very long. I think maybe a few months. So I think majority of the time it was me being level 2, probably dropping down to level 1, and then finally getting up there. And like I said, I went through focus twice, so I know that I was a level 3 for a long time. But I think I was only level 4 for a couple of months. And I kind of even barely remember that a little bit. But I remember it being fun. I mean, the marketing that they put out of riding horses and doing this and doing that, I've, to this day, at either place, but especially Carolina Springs, I do not remember ever seeing a horse, a cow, anything. I don't remember ever going off campus. I remember going outside for group a couple times, but like we were within our small group and we were right next to the building, or walking from the school building to the dorms to go to the bathroom, but that's it. There was never any outdoor activities, at least while I was there, or at least while I was in upper level. I never did any of those things.
Okay. And do you remember what your stretch was in focus?
Yeah. So I don't remember which came first. I want to say that my first one was Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. And then my second one was Mariah Carey, Butterfly.
Okay.
And I don't remember the Mariah Carey one as well, but I do remember the Whitney Houston one a lot more than I do remember the other one.
Okay. What about your I am statement? Do you remember that?
I do. I remember having that statement, but I don't remember what it was. I remember obviously fixing it a bit because I went through focus twice, and for us it was like a neon colored card, like note card, and then we would write on it, and then they would laminate it, and we would like keep it in our little shirt pocket or whatever. Yeah. So I do remember doing that, but I mean, I'm pretty sure the first time it was, I am this, and this, and then the second time it was a little bit less. But I mean, I'm pretty sure it was very much like, I'm loved. I don't think that changed. I think that was very much what it was both times. I think maybe intelligent or smart was probably on there. Um, I don't remember. Maybe independent or something. I mean, there was, I don't know. I actually just discovered that my dad has boxes and boxes of stuff for me at his house. And we live states away. And he's packed everything up. And I have my trunk. So when you're in upper level, you had a trunk where you could have your basically upper level things, where it was like, you had your street clothes, as we called it, when you'd have your day passes or your home passes. Our little candy bars, our little music things, our little whatever. We had them in those trunks, and he has a trunk, and so it's got all my stuff. So I believe that all my seminar stuff is in there. So I haven't gotten it yet. I'm very interested to see what comes back. But I do remember that being like really big for me. Again, it's like looking back, kind of hindsight's 2020, and it's just like back then we had these just false sense of accomplishment and just enlightenment and all. Like I remember physically feeling like wonderful and amazing and powerful during some of these experiences that we had in the seminar. But now looking back, it was a lot of manipulation. It was sleep deprivation. It was food deprivation during that time. It was, breaking you down to build you back up, and kind of a lot of brainwashing techniques and things like that. So it's kind of hard to look back and remember how wonderful I felt during that time, and then knowing now that it was, and then looking back too and being like, yeah, no, that was nonsense.
Okay. What was the hardest part about being at Carolina Springs for you?
I will say that Carolina Springs was a little bit easier or better for me than at Ivy Ridge. Ivy Ridge was probably easily one of the worst experiences that I've had in my entire life to date. And I'm almost 35. To date. But Carolina Springs was a little bit easier. It felt like a little bit more laid. Not much. I'm saying, like, not much, but a little bit more laid back. People seemed a little bit nicer. Maybe it was like the southern kind of, hospitality feel a little bit with some of the people that were working there. So maybe that was a little bit of the difference. The food was a little bit better, if I remember. Like I remember on Sundays we would have, pancakes or waffles. We would have grits. We would have, so it was like it was just those little things that really, kind of meant a lot to us, or at least to me. So it wasn't terrible. I also didn't have someone who was, sexually abusing me at the time either. So that was obviously huge. But there definitely was a lot of psychological kind of warfare on us, the same type of stuff, the same seminars, the same family rep type of things, and pitting your family against you, and that kind of stuff. So that was, and us pitting each other, or pitting us against each other type of thing. So that was still there. But it definitely seemed a little bit easier to go through, I guess you could say. I mean, I still wouldn't wish either one on my worst enemy, but
Okay.
it wasn't as Ivy Ridge.
And did you spend any time in solitary confinement or intervention or worksheets when you were at either place?
I think I did. I did some worksheets in the beginning, when I first got there, and I think honestly that was more of just me figuring out how to transition, and I just would be negative in points all the time. Um, I did a lot more when I was at Ivy Ridge, especially in the beginning at Ivy Ridge, because I just was like, this is bullshit. Like, this is not okay. I'm not, this is not good. But it was a lot less when I was at Carolina Springs, for sure.
Okay. And how many people would you say on average was there at Carolina Springs when you got there and when you left? If you had to estimate.
Yeah, I think there was probably less than 100, maybe close to, but less than 100 when I was there, and I mean probably around the same when I left. I don't think there were too many. I mean, because there were people kind of coming and going. I mean, it wasn't like a huge coming and going for sure, but yeah, I would probably say there was, I mean, minimum a little bit, like maybe 80-ish people when I got there, and then probably around the same when I left. And I can't really, and this goes the same for Ivy Ridge too. Like I don't really know about the guys' side, because we were so separated from them.
Okay. Did they load you up with prescription medication or take you off cold turkey at either of these places?
I don't believe that I was on any medication except for my asthma medication and like allergy medication when I first got to Ivy Ridge. I do remember them giving me pills that I didn't know what they were, but I got in trouble for not taking them. Like, they literally just shoved a finger down my throat at times. I got sat on, things like that. But I don't know what they were. Because I'm pretty, even looking back in my files, it looks like the only medication I was on was sprays, nasal sprays, and an inhaler. So I shouldn't have been on pills. So I still to this day have no idea what pills I was given at Ivy Ridge. But when I went to Carolina Springs, I don't remember any medication at all.
Okay. And what was the worst thing you saw at either place or heard about?
I mean, I think that the sexual and physical abuse that I either went through on my own or directly knew about, at Ivy Ridge specifically, a little bit at Carolina Springs, but mostly Ivy Ridge specifically was probably the worst. Looking back, I think very much that too. But the physical, or not, I'm sorry, not physical, the psychological stuff that we were put through, as far as the seminars and the jargon of how to talk to each other, like the group sessions and things like that. I think it just, I mean, we were kids. We were, our minds were still developing. I think, and I think now that we're all a lot older, I think we can see the damage that has done to so many of us. So it's hard to say that one is worse than the other, because I think it's just really screwed us all up, in the end, in some way. But it definitely wasn't the food. It wasn't, it wasn't things like that. It wasn't the grass or lack thereof, but it was kind of the group of everything that really, as young developing minds, and just being in like a a prison, but worse than prison. I mean, I do remember leaving, like once I was out and I was in college, I do remember kind of trying to explain it to people sometimes when they would ask, oh, where'd you go to high school? And I was like, oh, this is going to be a whole thing. And I remember kind of just explaining it to people and them looking at me like I was a crazy person, like I was making it up. And I was like, no, like, and I would only tell them, tidbits. But I would say, all in all, I would have rather been in prison. And I was like 18 years old and I had never been to jail or prison or anything. And I still to this day now would say the same thing, like knowing what prison and jail, and like, I haven't gone, but knowing intellectually what that means, I would say that it probably would have been better for my mental health or for all of our mental health to go to something like that versus where we went.
Okay. And what has been the hardest with you reintegrating into society afterwards?
I think I was a little bit lucky. So I was basically how the timeline works out, I was at Air or Ivy Ridge, for my sophomore year. I was basically at Carolina Springs for my junior year. And then when I was at Carolina Springs, I was level 4 and I got dropped because I walked a friend to the bathroom from the school trailer to the dorms to take her to the bathroom, and she told me at the time that she was getting pulled, which means her parents were coming to get her. And she was a really good friend of mine, and so I gave her a hug goodbye. She was very much she was gay. She was a lesbian, and I'm bi, and a lot of people knew that about me at the time. I didn't talk about it a lot, but a lot of people knew that about me. And so I don't know who saw us or who heard anything, but it somehow came back to the dorm moms or someone of authority that we were kissing or something. Like I was kissing her goodbye or something, which, I mean, we were just hugging. But because we were both, part of the LGBTQ community, and for anyone who doesn't know, that was very much demonized in all of these programs. That was not okay. So I got dropped to level 1. And then I think at that point, my dad was like, never mind. I've been doing this for over 2 years. I'm not paying for this anymore. So I was sent to a non-affiliated military school in Missouri, which I actually loved. I had such a great time there because I was able to talk, and I was able to play sports, and I was able to actually do real school and, be a high school kid to an extent. And so I graduated from there. I did great. I graduated with a 4.0. I was captain of the volleyball team. I was the only female on the rifle team with the history of the school. Like, I did a lot of stuff. It was great. And so I think I got a little bit lucky that I had a bit of a transition. So it was still a boarding school, but it wasn't what we went through. It was definitely very different. But then after that, I, when I graduated, I still wasn't allowed home. I basically was just dropped at college. I was lucky enough to get into a college, signed my life away on loans, all these different things. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how bills worked. I didn't know how taxes worked. I literally did not know anything of the world. And so I was able to do what I wanted. I didn't have someone looking over me or telling me what to do. So I rarely went to class. I changed my major a million times, but I still didn't go to class half the time. I started drinking a lot. I was drunk a lot of college. Definitely, of course, started having relationships, having sex, things like that, things that I had never done before. I started doing some drugs. Nothing too crazy. It was just pretty much kind of weed and some opioids here and there, but nothing, too crazy. And I just was all over the place. People were, my friends around me were, advancing in their degrees, getting their bachelor's degrees, getting jobs, doing all this stuff. And I just was like, I'm just still trying to figure out how to scrape up some rent, and I'm drunk half the time. And, like I had a great time, but it wasn't very working, as they would say, as far as the program stuff. And then I kind of struggled ever since. I've applied to a lot of colleges. I've started a lot of degrees. I've just never been able to finish. I had a hard time trying to figure out what I want to do. I was a vet tech for a long time, which I love. I was a vet tech for about 12 years. That ended a couple years ago when I was in an accident and really hurt my back. But I mean, I'm still at a point, I'm almost 35, and I'm still at a point where I'm trying to figure out what I love, what I want to do, what my next steps are. So, I mean, it's just been a figuring things out basically since I left. It hasn't changed in 20 years.
Okay. If you could go back in a time machine and not go through these places, would you do it and why?
I would never do it. That's one thing I've said, that I've met a lot of wonderful people through here that I'm still close with. But no offense to them, I would never go through this again, ever. And it's because I think it's changed my life forever, but in a very negative way. And I look now, I'm married. I have a 3.5-year-old. And I'm, but I'm still trying to figure myself out. And that's not the space that I want to be in when I'm married and I have a child and I want to, have that life. And I don't have a degree and I don't have a career, and but it's because I've just been lost this whole time. And I think it's because I didn't have that time back then, to really figure out what I wanted. And I didn't get the love and care that I really needed back then. And that's what I needed. I don't think that I needed something like this. I think I needed love and care and maybe a new hobby or something to maybe take out some of my frustrations or things like that. And maybe I wouldn't have been, had such an attitude when I was 15. But I was 15, 14, 15, of course. I even have an email from my mom from the first school, where the parents were supposed to send things to the family reps of why you're sending them to the school. And my mom said, well, I don't have custody, because my dad had full custody. I don't have custody. I was against this. I didn't want her to go there. I saw that she was unhappy there with her dad and her stepmom. And I offered to have her come live with me, but her dad was not okay with that. And all the things of why she's being sent here are all things that I did as a teenager and all things that I see as normal. And I think she just needs this love and affection. And reading that back now, it kills me, because I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I needed. And also being a mom now, you couldn't pay me enough to send my kid away. I don't care what he does. I would figure it out. But I know that maybe back then was a little bit different. Mental health awareness is not what it is now. All of that kind of stuff. But no, I would never in a million years go back, ever, and go through that again.
Okay. And is there anything else you want people to know about your experience, or anything you might tell a parent thinking about sending their kid to a place like this? And this would be the time that you could share if you want to share some of the stuff.
Oh, okay. So yes. So if anyone is thinking about sending their kid to something like this, I would say, first of all, never do that. There are so many other options. Never anything like this. Always check into anything. Look for all the red flags. Like, look for if you can't speak to your child for a certain amount of time, or you can't go visit your child at any point, or when they talk about educational values or what the education is going to be, and they're not spelling things out. I mean, if things are not spelled out to a T, and you can't just show up at the school and have a tour of the entire school and talk to regular students, not just quote unquote upper levels or who's been doing well in the program. If you cannot just talk to a regular schmegular student when you walk in, that's a red flag, because there's something going on there. So do your research. And I mean, that kind of goes along with everything. But I do have a few, I mean, I'll probably cut it pretty short, but I do have some statement of fact forms and some grievance forms that I have. And I'll just I won't read the whole thing. I'll just go through it pretty quickly. So statement of facts were basically, if something happened, you would just state what it was, whether it was a staff member doing something that you didn't agree with, which that was rare, obviously, because we would get in trouble for doing that. We would always obviously get in trouble by the staff member. But it was basically like someone else doing something and you didn't have the authority to maybe correct them. Or like I have one in here that talks about laundry. It's like we didn't, it says I didn't have my clothes washed for almost 4 weeks. I went a month having like 2 uniforms that weren't washed for a month. Like that's crazy. But I wrote this, and then it does say at the bottom that the laundry schedule was changed. I don't remember if that actually was done. But so we would do things like that. So there's one here where, what was this one? I guess some of the girls were chosen to clean the library and the kind of computer lab area. And I guess when we finished, it was after the time when the computer lab was open for school and things like that. And we also at a certain time started doing our daily reflections, or our evals for the day, which was, giving ourselves points and things, which were always looked at by staff, and they would say whether or not we actually earned those points or what have you. And so it says that we weren't able to get back into the computer lab when we were done cleaning. And then I have a grievance that actually goes along with that. So grievances were us saying we didn't agree with the corrections that we got and trying to get those points back. And so it even says in here that we weren't allowed back in. And then I got a correction. I got a NFD, not following directions, which I believe was like 25 points. For not finishing my evals or my daily reflections, but I was like, we weren't allowed to finish them. And at the end of the description, we actually did have to say how we were accountable, because accountability was everything. And I think at this point, I basically was like, I'm not with the shit. I don't want to do this anymore. And so I did at the end say, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have cleaned or something, which, I mean, obviously that wasn't my choice. And I do have quite a few grievance forms here that it says how I am accountable. And the only thing that I wrote was I'm in a program. I was over it. I was like, I don't know how else to be accountable, but it's things of, the teacher said that we weren't allowed to talk to them until she was done with her evals. And then it seemed like she was done because she answered another girl's question. So I raised my hand to ask a question, and she answered my question. And then in the end, I got in trouble because I wasn't following directions, because she wasn't answering questions, even though clearly she was. Little things like that. I mean, it was just the smallest things. I got corrections for stepping on someone's foot and saying, excuse me. Like, it's just an automatic response sometimes. Or it was, I had to tell on someone else for someone opened the door and the other person said, thank you. And the other person said, you're welcome. So I had to go tell on that person. I have statement of fact forms written on me because I was looking at other people. And so that could be a form of communication because I looked at someone or I smiled. I mean, it's these things that I think a lot of the parents or other people who aren't familiar with what we went through, that like, it's like when we say that everything was scrutinized, it was our eye contact, it was our breath, it was everything that we said. I mean, it was everything. And I think that is extremely detrimental to any human in general, but especially us as kids. I think that it's, and the fact that these places are still running today, I think that is what alarms me the most, because I know that there were so many more programs back then, and there are so many of us that are survivors. And I started looking people up as soon as I was able. I was 2007. I was at the military school, and I was in the journalism class, and we got to use a computer with internet. I mean, that was the first time since I was 13 that I was able to use the internet. So like 4 years. And I remember trying to find everybody on Facebook when Facebook first came out, and MySpace and all that kind of stuff. And then it was just more people and more people and more. And even now, there's so many more of us. But the fact that there's still these places going on today, there's kids right now going through what we're talking about right now. And there's future kids in danger of being sent away and going through this stuff. I mean, I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of our stories at this point. And the documentary is that, yes, we went through a lot of traumatizing stuff. Yes, we're still struggling. We're still picking up the pieces. That is still extremely important, and it shouldn't be put to the side at all. And we still need to shed light on the places that are still functioning and the kids still going through this and the future kids that are going to go through this, and getting that shut down and putting an end to it. Because I mean, there are so many other things. There's therapy, there's different things you can do with your kids. I mean, sometimes it's just talk to your kid, ask them what's wrong. There's reasons why kids are sneaking out, and there's reasons why they're drinking and they're doing drugs and they're doing all these other things. There's reasons why. Find the root problem, but don't send them away for someone else that you don't know in another state to handle that. That's never a good way. And for most of us, I can say from what I've seen and my own personal experience, a lot of us don't have a good relationship with our parents. So if our parents want to get us back, this is the last thing to do, for sure.
For sure, definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If you ever want to do a part 2, just let me know and we'll make it happen. And if you watched this far in the video, please make sure you like the video, share the video, and subscribe if you're not already. And we will catch you on the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.